Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Read. Today I'm going to be doing a review of the book Stories I Only Tell My Friends by Rob Lowe. Before I get into the story, I just wanted to say that it's really disconcerting having Rob Lowe staring at you all the time in your room. I mean, it's kind of weird. He's too good looking, and so I legitimately put the book face down on my desks and everything, but he's still on the back as a giant picture and he's even on the spine. So that's a little weird, but it makes sense because obviously people recognize his face, so you kind of want his face on as much of the book cover as possible to make sure that people pick it up. The synopsis for this book is pretty simple. It's a memoir. For those of you who don't know, Rob Lowe is an actor. He was a part of the Brad Pack in the 80s and, did a variety of movies. And then he was on the TV show The West Wing as Sam Seaborn, which is probably one of his most famous characters, and currently he's on the TV show Parks and Recreation as Chris Traeger. Now obviously, because I picked up this book, I'm a fan of Rob Lowe. I've seen, a handful of his movies, and I'm a big fan of The West Wing, so that's basically how I knew who he was, and I'm a big fan of Parks and Recreation and everything, so I kind of wanted to pick up this book. I knew a little bit about his life as a celebrity. He was kind of known in the 80s and 90s as being a womanizer and dating all of these different people. There's a lot of rumors that go on with the Brat Pack and everything, so you never really know what exactly is true or not, but I had some idea of those stories. Rob Lowe starts the story off in the very beginning, so you find out a lot about his childhood and where he grew up and his family. His parents are divorced, and then eventually his mom moves from Ohio to California. When he moves to California, he ends up being neighbors with Emilio Estevez and Charlie Sheen, which obviously has a big impact on his life. Ever since he was a kid, he wanted to be an actor, and then moving to California and becoming neighbors with a family that had an actor, Martin Sheen, in it, and so that really helped him figure out exactly how to break into the industry. It's really funny seeing him tell stories about these people because they were his friends growing up. Those are the people he grew up with, and yet at the same time we only know them in the celebrity sense, so it's kind of weird thinking about growing up being best friends with celebrities, but I mean that's just the life that he lived. The way he structures his stories is very different than what I was expecting. It does feel like he's telling stories to his friends, but it also at the same time feels like he's holding things back, which I guess is understandable because it's not like he wants to pull people's names through the mud or anything like that, but it very much doesn't feel like he's being quite as open as he could be. Either that or he does very much look at his life through rose-colored glasses and is able to reflect on things with a different perspective than maybe when he was in it. This isn't really an amazing memoir or anything like that. I think Rob Lowe kind of thinks he's a better writer than he really is. He seems to use the same style of writing throughout the entire book, which is where he'll tell a story and you don't know who the person is, and then at the very end it'll be this big reveal of a celebrity. Like one of the stories is where I think his agent wanted to set him up on a dinner with another actress. This is while he was a teenager, maybe like 16 years old. He gets set up on this date and he tells the story of them talking about different things and talking about acting and all this stuff, and at the end he reveals that it was Sarah Jessica Parker the whole time, and how later on he got to see Sarah Jessica Parker accept her Emmy for Sex and the City. It's fine to do things like that. Obviously he's interacted with a lot of people and he had gotten to be friends or work with a lot of people who are really famous in the industry now, but at the same time when you do that 20 times, by the end of it you're just like, okay, this is another story about a celebrity, let's just see which one it is. Before Outsiders, his stories are very much all about family and friends and growing up. And then after Outsiders, it becomes much more about the celebrity world. I wouldn't necessarily say that Rob Lowe, sugarcoats his life, but he definitely glosses over some of the more bad boy aspects. Anytime he talks about dating someone, he doesn't really talk about them that much. He dated the Princess of Monaco, and yet he barely talked about that in his book. Obviously he mentions it, and obviously he talks about how they met, but there's very little about their actual relationship in the book. So I don't know if that's on purpose or he just preferred not to talk about it, or if there just really isn't much to talk about. It's hard to tell, but those are kind of the things you always look forward to when you're reading celebrity memoirs, is sort of like the inside track on things that you may not have known otherwise. Some of the stuff I was really looking forward to is the West Wing section of the book, especially because Rob Lowe leaves in season 3 of the West Wing. Hopefully that's not considered a spoiler for anyone. So Rob Lowe leaves at the end of season 3. Based on what was said in the news, there were contract disputes Basically, the entire cast got raises except for Rob Lowe. And then the other thing is the fact that even though he was sort of the biggest name on the show outside of Martin Sheen, he wasn't really getting very many storylines. And he does mention those things in the book. He talks a lot about the audition process of going into the West Wing, you know, how he read the script. And, you know, he felt like Sam Seaborn was kind of like an idealized version of himself. And, you know, he had to get the part and all this stuff. And then he kind of talks a little bit about that time right before, you know, the pilot, right before it really airs on TV. And then he just talks about at the end how he left the show. And there's nothing about that 3-year period that he was on the show. 3 years is kind of a long time, and you don't have any stories or anecdotes that you could share about being on the West Wing, especially since that's one of your most famous roles. And I think I was really disappointed with that as well, just because when he talked about The Outsiders, he went into a lot of details about just a lot of the little things that happened. He talked about how all of these guys hung out in the hotel together during the Outsiders shoot, how they would wrestle and fight and kind of get themselves pumped up for this performance that they had to do. But for the West Wing, he didn't really have very much to say about it at all, which makes me wonder whether or not part of him is still slightly upset by it. But at the same time, I have to wonder whether or not he is, because he always is willing to talk praise about it. Even in the book, he talks about how it's probably, you know, one of the best characters he's ever done, and it's what he's most recognized for. He says really great things about Aaron Sorkin and his writing style. I follow him on Twitter, and he never really has anything bad to say about West Wing. Obviously, he's smart enough to know that probably wouldn't be wise to do anyways, but he doesn't really speak of it fondly in terms of his experience there or anything that happened while he was there. I don't know if I would really necessarily recommend this book to people. I mean, I guess if you're a really big Rob Lowe fan, pick it up. The only reason why I really picked it up is because, I mean, I was interested in it somewhat, but also it was only $3 in Barnes & Noble, so I figured no harm. But I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. This isn't really a horrible book to read. It's really basic. It doesn't take much time to get through the book, but if you're looking for really interesting or really juicy details about Rob Lowe's life, you're not necessarily going to get that. Obviously, he has a bias towards the things that have happened in his life and the way he tells the stories, but I very much feel like he's holding back quite a bit. So I don't know, maybe Rob Lowe could write another memoir in like 40 years before he dies, so being slightly more honest about the things that had happened in his life, because it definitely doesn't feel like he's doing that here. That's all I have for today. As usual, I'll have links down below to my Goodreads, Tumblr, and Twitter. If you guys have read this memoir, or are interested in this memoir, or fans of Rob Lowe, feel free to leave your comments down below. That's all I have for now, and thanks for watching. And obviously, I love The West Wing, so I knew a little bit about his past life, as if he's dead. He moves to California. He ends up in a neighborhood, and his neighbor glosses over some of the major bad boy moments. Oh, I have this on my hand while I'm doing this. Feel free to leave comments down in the description below. That doesn't make sense.